Yeah, now Europe is an interesting VPP market because when I did my first VPP report, I want to say around 2010, you said VPP in the United States and everyone thought you were talking about demand response. If you said the term in Europe, everyone thought you were talking about renewable energy. And in fact, I think supposedly the first VPP in Europe was Siemens, I think aggregated like 5 little hydro plants or something like that. And they said they were all like single digit megawatts. They weren't kilowatt. And the idea was, well, if we put them into a pool, as a group, they're more valuable because if we can bid into a market, we'll know we'll be able to deliver and, we can share the resources. And then from there, there were some pilot projects. I know there was another one in Germany where I think they had 28 renewable resources scattered all over the country. And they said, we proved that with software, you can manage all those renewables and provide 24/7 power. And of course, Europe, lots of renewables, a lot of feed-in tariffs, but also a lot of interconnected markets. So very different in the US. You think US, we got Canada, which Ontario's a hotspot, but the rest of Canada is kind of like Australia.
Exactly.
It's kind of large off-grid, and then Mexico.
Don't tell the Canadians.
No, and then Mexico has its own thing, but it's not like Europe where you have all these countries and they're all like integrated into a market. So you're now in Europe. What are your key takeaways from Europe?
Well, certainly, you hit the nail on the head. One of the things our business development folks out of Europe always remind us of is that it's actually 38 markets. So it's not one market. There's actually 38 of them, and they're all interconnected in different and various ways. And so as a result, you have almost every country individually defining what its future is going to be for these future markets. You're right. Europe, by the way, would never really think about demand response broadly, and they've moved very swiftly to this idea of virtual power plants. Definitely grew out of this idea of small hydro and small power plants, making them work together. We're doing work there that's bringing loads and batteries into that same equation, even with some of these kind of single-digit generators, right. And large industrial plants, because large industrial is a big part of the energy complex in major parts of Europe.
Yes.
So you have to work with those large industrials and the resources they have, the flexibility, make it all work together. Now, we're not operating in every country in Europe. We certainly can't. We're not that big, and there's not that many mature markets. But there are certain spots around Europe where there's some real interesting things happening at the wholesale level to start to bring distributed energy into those markets for sure.
Yeah, what I heard is I think Germany was one of the leaders. I mentioned Germany already, and I don't remember what year it was, maybe around 2013, I want to say, where the issue was there was so much solar coming onto the grid with these lucrative feed-in tariffs that everyone was oversizing, and there were all these grid problems, more like a DERMS problem, like they had to literally turn all these people off. And so what they did is they scaled back the feed-in tariffs and then created a spot market, the idea being that extra power shouldn't always be subsidized at the super high rate. It didn't make a lot of economic sense. And I think that's what they said enabled creation of a VPP. So I think of Germany, I think of the UK. I don't know what other countries come to mind that are good VPP candidates.
Yeah, so certainly Germany for sure. The UK has a pretty good frequency market and a capacity market today that distributed energy can operate in. We see some new things emerging. Italy was actually at a point where they were about ready to move forward with that market. That's still a little bit on hold because of some of the politics in Italy.
Right.
But now you start looking at some of the surrounding countries, the Netherlands, Benelux, Belgium, Luxembourg. Some of those countries are now starting to actually emerge. They're following Germany's theme here in terms of where they're looking to go. We also see Germany in and of itself is actually starting to bring some new market products to bear as well. So not only do you have the energy components of it, but they're starting to bring forward a frequency type market. They're also starting to bring forward a capacity or a tertiary reserves market as well. So as those markets emerge in the 2020 timeframe, I think we're going to see a lot more activity in Germany.
Yeah, someone once even told me Poland was a potential VPP market. Even Eastern Bloc, although I think their grid and their markets probably aren't as advanced as Germany. France, originally I used to think wasn't, with the large nuclear fleet, but, they're also sort of transitioning. I know they have some big industrial loads also. And then Denmark, small country, but I know like they did some interesting early VPP experiments, sort of blending microgrids with CHP and wind, and then they were aggregated into a VPP up at the transmission level. So I think Europe, is very interesting market. It's funny because we talked about, US, Japan, Australia, Europe, all kind of coming to these concepts with a slightly different starting point, I guess you could say, and maybe emphasis, but they all fit into this bucket of DER innovation, and you can put in the bucket of VPP DERMS. But one last question about Europe, because they actually have a DSO structure there, which is what's fairly unique, and that on the surface would seem to imply DERMS opportunities. I don't know, that's sort of a surface level thinking, but is that true?
It's true in some localized markets. It's not true all across Europe.
Okay.
I would say that at the, again, those DSOs are set up in different ways, and in some cases, their distribution networks are actually more resilient than we may find even here in North America.
Oh, definitely.
And so as a result, they operate at different voltage levels, they operate in different ways, so they're a little bit more resilient to some of the DER impacts. The other thing that I'm always reminded of when I go to Europe is you don't see a lot of giant flat roofs around Europe. So
Right.
The impact of localized solar is a little bit less in certain parts of different countries and certain
Right.
cities.
That's
so it's more of a bulk power problem, and how do we manage things like negative price, how do we manage frequency, and how do we manage tertiary reserves or wholesale system level demand response type effects.